In this video, I'm going to give you some actionable ways where you can trade options with a small account. Because I know that when you're trading options and you have a small account, it can be extremely difficult because everything that you do, you're going to be limited by the capital that you have at your disposal. And I was 100% in that position when I was starting to trade options. I didn't have a big account whatsoever, and I was really struggling to basically trade options because everything that I was doing, I felt very limited in what I could do because I had such a small capital. And even though I don't have the biggest account in the world, definitely not, I found a couple of ways to trade options even though you have a small account. So I thought that it could be interesting to share those with you, so maybe it helps some of you that like to trade options but still have a small account. So let's get into it. The first way you can trade options with a small account is to very simply trade cheaper stocks. And I know that can sound obvious when I just say trade cheaper stocks, but when you try to, for example, trade Apple, Nvidia, Amazon, or Tesla, or all those stocks that are quite high priced, you're going to need inherently way more capital compared to if you trade a stock that is worth $30 or $40. And to give you a quick example of what I mean by the difference between trading expensive stocks versus cheaper stocks is that if you, for example, let's say try to sell a naked put on Nvidia, you're going to approximately need $3,000 just for that position. And you know, that's what I mean. If you have a capital of, let's say, $5,000, you absolutely cannot afford to have a single position equaling $3,000 just for one position. It would be extremely risky. Hence why I'm saying that by trading cheaper stocks, you're going to reduce the buying power needed when you trade options, for example, when you sell options. And by doing so, it's going to allow you to trade more stocks, have more positions on, and actually take less risk on individual positions. But you'd probably tell me now, okay, JC, you're telling me that I should trade cheaper stocks, but which stocks should I trade? Well, when I was starting out and I didn't necessarily have a lot of capital, I mean, actually, I almost didn't have any, to be honest. Well, I built basically a watch list of stocks that were liquid, that were approximately healthy for most of them. And that was basically allowing me to have a watch list of stocks, around 30-40 stocks, that I could trade without taking too much capital. I was just trading all the stocks in that watch list. I wasn't going out of it because I just couldn't afford anything else. And that's how I personally started trading options. I started really focusing on this watch list with cheap stocks that allowed me to trade options without taking too much risk on single positions. And of course, after that, I started putting more money in, allowing me to trade more expensive stocks. But at first, that's really how I started. Let me show you in TestyWorks which type of stocks I'm talking about. So right now we are in the TestyWorks platform as always. I'm sure that by now you must be familiar with it. And basically what you have in front of you is a watch list of all the different stocks that I'm talking about. So the name of that watch list is very simple. It's minus $50. So when I did it, I basically looked at all the stocks under $50 because I just didn't have enough capital to trade stocks above $50. I mean, that was a very simple title, but that was pretty much representative of my situation back in the days. So in terms of stocks that you can find in that watch list, you can find, for example, Alcoa, American Airlines, let's say you have Bank of America, BP, CCL. I mean, you have plenty of stocks that you can find in this watch list, and you can see that you have actually quite a lot of them. And something that is quite interesting to notice is that you can see that you have all those stars in this column, and this column is called LIQ for liquidity. And all the stocks in this watch list are pretty liquid. I mean, if not all of them, you will always find a ton of open interest for most of the stocks that you're trying to trade in this watch list. So it's quite nice because you have a watch list of cheap stocks that allow you, if you have a small account, to trade options without taking too much risk. And they're pretty much all liquid stocks with liquid options, which makes us as option traders a life that is way easier. After that, if you find stocks that are above $50, it could be because, you know, just from the moment I actually made the watch list to right now when you're checking it, maybe actually some stocks have moved above $50 or, you know, like around the $60 per share levels, but you get my point. Most of the stocks are basically under $50, they're liquid, and I used to trade so many of those. I mean, just looking at those stocks, I think I've traded those stocks way more actually than what are the classical stocks like Apple or Amazon or Tesla. I think I've traded those stocks way more. And in a way, even when you have a bigger account, it's still nice to be able to trade those stocks because it offers you some diversification. You don't have to necessarily lock up a lot of capital for one single position. You can spread out a lot more, which I think is pretty nice. You'll find the link of that watchlist in the description of this video. So if you want to download it, just go in the description. You'll find the link there. Just download and just put it back into your trading platform, or just look at all the tickers and and enjoy. The only thing that I'm asking is that if you end up liking it, if you end up liking this watch list, please don't hesitate to like this video and subscribe to my channel. That's really the best way to support me and to thank me, and I'd really appreciate it. So now that we talked about the first way to trade options with a small account, let's talk about the second way. So the second way is to trade spreads. And I'm saying this because usually what I see a lot is that either people are trying to, for example, buy options on very expensive stocks, or just not even expensive stocks, but just buying options, or they're trying to sell naked options. However, when you have a small account, it's extremely difficult to actually afford all of this, as I said before. So one other solution to trade options with a smaller account is to trade spreads, either debit spreads or credit spreads. And let me show you in TestyWorks what I mean. Right now, we are looking at the Tesla option chain. If, for example, I go, let's say, into the November expiration, and I'm willing to buy, let's say, the 755 call. So you can see that it costs basically $57 of premium, which is basically representing a max loss of potentially $5,700. But obviously, you see that the buying power is $5,700, but obviously not everyone has $5,000 or $6,000 to put on the table just for one call option. So what you can do is that instead of just buying the call option, why don't you sell after that an option, and it's going to reduce a lot actually the buying power required for that trade, and you still have that long exposure on the stock. And that's what we call a debit spread. Debit spreads are great because it's going to reduce actually the capital required, and you can still have this net buying exposure that you can have. For example, you can still be long Vega, so I'm not going to go too much in the details of what implications it has on the Greeks, but just to tell you that in terms of capital requirements, if you're willing to, for example, buy options, then debit spreads might be a good solution. After that, I'm also a big fan of credit spreads, and the difference between debit spreads and credit spreads is that when you trade debit spreads, as I said before, you are a net buyer, meaning that if the implied volatility rises, it's going to benefit you, compared to credit spreads, where if there is an implied volatility rise, it's going to hurt you. However, when you're trading credit spreads, you have the time decay working in your favor, meaning that every day that passes, options lose a tiny bit of value. And because you are selling options, you're selling an option that is worth more compared to the one that you're buying, you are overall a net seller. So you basically end up making money with that time decay. Every day you're going to earn money. That's why personally, I prefer credit spreads, but the concept is exactly the same as debit spreads. If you're trading credit spreads, for example, let's say that I sell the 750 put and I buy the 745 put. Now I'm actually selling a put credit spread. As you can see, I have a net credit just down below. It means that I'm overall a net seller because I'm receiving a credit. And what you can see is that the buying power for that trade is of $287 compared to if I was willing to just sell the naked options. What do you think is the buying power required? Well, if I just try to, for example, sell a naked option on Tesla, well, I would need a buying power of $30,000. So you can see that there is actually quite a big difference. I actually didn't expect to see such a big difference, to be honest, but you can see that it can be quite useful to trade credit spreads or just debit spreads because you have such a lower capital requirement. And when you have a small account, it's absolutely a game changer when you start trading spreads, because now you can afford doing things that you couldn't before if you were willing to just buy one option or just sell one naked option. And to give you a small anecdote on how I was trading at the beginning when I was trading options with a smaller account than what I'm doing now, well, at the beginning, I was just trading credit spreads. I mean, I wasn't trading naked options whatsoever. And because I love to sell options, I tend to lean more on the credit spreads rather than debit spreads. But the ideal situation, let's say, would be to sell naked options and to make more money, but I just couldn't afford anything. So I was just selling credit spreads all the time. And honestly, that allowed me to basically enter the market and be able to trade options without having too much capital tied to my trades, which was very nice. So you can see that if you combine this, if you combine the fact of trading cheap stocks and you try to trade, for example, on credit spreads, it starts becoming a lot more accessible if you have a small account. Don't try to go for very expensive stocks like Tesla or anything. Stay, for example, within the watch list that I gave you and just, for example, trade credit spreads or debit spreads in this watch list. So not only you have smaller capital requirements because you trade cheaper stocks, but you also have lower capital requirements because you're also trading spreads, which as a small account, I mean, it's really, really good to do this. And that's what I did personally, and it worked very well for me at least. Last but not least, let's talk about the third way that you can trade options with a small account. And unfortunately, that's not necessarily going to be what you want to hear. If after what we've been discussing, the fact of trading cheaper stocks and the fact of trading spreads, if it's still not enough, maybe it's actually better for you to save more money before actually getting into options. And you know, I know that this is not necessarily like the best answer that you'd like to hear. Like you'd like to hear, like, let's say, you know, take more risk or whatever it is. But the truth is, if you cannot trade options with cheaper stocks and you cannot trade spreads, you cannot afford spreads, there is nothing wrong with that. It's maybe that just right now, options are maybe not the best thing to do with your money. Maybe you should focus first on saving more money rather than just wasting it and actually not having enough capital to do things properly and just wasting your hard-earned money. And trust me, I know how it feels. I know because I've been there. Like literally at the beginning, I didn't have like a penny to put into options when I started, and every month I started saving as much money as I could, and I was just putting it into my account, and I was trying to save as much as I could. Like every dollar or every pound, because I'm based in the UK, every pound that I was saving was literally going straight into my account. And obviously I know that this is annoying because, you know, what you see on YouTube is like you can do absolutely everything, you know, there is no limit to what you can do. But the truth is, if you don't have much capital, it's going to be extremely hard to actually make something out of options. So maybe it's actually worth, you know, to put like, let's say 2, 3, 4 grand on the side and start trading small with the cheap stocks with spreads, so you can start doing things properly rather than rushing things and just ending up losing it all because you took too much risk for your small account. And trust me, if you're in that position right now where you're actually pissed at me because I just said that you should maybe save more money before getting into options, the fact of being able to save more money before getting into options is probably going to be the only reason why you will still be successful on the long term, because you're willing to actually be patient for that. I'm going to stop my rant because I'm going to start sounding like Gary Vee or something. So, but you get my point. Sometimes it's maybe just better to hold off options and save a bit more before actually you get into options properly with the right sized account. I hope this was useful, and I hope you'll enjoy the watch list, and maybe that helps you have some tips on how you could trade options if you have a small account. If it has helped you, don't hesitate to let me know in the comment section. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have or just discuss with you if you have any comment to make on this video. Please make good and informed decisions. I'll see you in the next video, and in the meantime, I wish you all the best.